I got into music at age 3, interestingly enough. I was very, very sick as a young boy, and for some reason my parents took me to a department store at age 3, and my father put me in front of a phonograph. I had never seen a phonograph before, and he says, "You actually got well listening to the records and the orchestra. You were just absolutely fascinated by this thing spinning and music coming out of it." And that actually started me, and from that point on, they couldn't keep me away from a turntable or a record player at that time. And I would and in terms of conducting, I remember there used to be a thing called caroms. It was like pool, but only a little square thing, and you shoot these caroms into these little slots on it. There was 4 carom slots, and you'd shoot the caroms into the side. And I would take the carom stick, which was like a very small little pool stick, and I would sit in front of the record player, and I would just sit and conduct the record. And I did that for hours on end. And when I think about that, I wonder how much of you is pre-programmed that way to do something that you're going to do later on in life. Practicing was interesting. I wanted to study piano. Actually, my parents wanted me to study piano. And so at age 3, they brought in a piano teacher to look at me and evaluate me. And she says, "He's too young. You should never start at this age." And they must have had a piano at the house. I must have been always fooling around with the piano. And which was actually a mistake on the piano teacher's part, because you should actually start as a student as soon as they can speak is when you should start them on piano. And so I didn't start until I was age 7.5. And when I first started, I was really taken with the whole idea of reading music and learning. But after a while, it became a chore, and I wanted to go out and play. Well, Dad, for some reason, wanted me to study the piano, and I had to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning before elementary school, practice for 2 hours. At 8 o'clock, I had breakfast and got dressed, and at 8:30 I was walking to school. At 3:30 I was back walking home, or actually at 3 o'clock I was walking home, and at 3:30 I was back at the piano for another hour. There was 3 hours a day, every day, and there wasn't that much music in the whole book to practice. So I grew to hate the piano until probably about age 14, 15, 16, something in there, and then they couldn't keep me away from the piano. I mean, I was practicing up to 8, 9 hours a day. I think I always had music going on in my head, and I could not transfer what was going on in my head to my fingers, and I couldn't, of course, even know how to write the notes I attempted it. It wasn't probably until I got into college that I started understanding how harmonies worked and so forth, and then I started composing. I remember I had written a song to a girlfriend in college, and then I actually wrote the whole piece out away from the piano. So that was kind of interesting. Well, in terms of career, there were a number of people that I had great regard for over a period of time. Peter Nero, great pianist. Andre Previn, another great pianist, conductor, and orchestrator. Michel Legrand, who wrote The Summer of '42. Henry Mancini, John Williams. I had 5 big people that were in my life that really highly influenced my life. And hearing the sounds of an orchestra, I thought, I've got to do that, I've got to do that, I've got to do that. And I was fascinated by the whole process. and I was always trying to write kind of innovative things. And then over a period of time, I just found that you didn't have to write innovative things. Just something simple is what stays with people. People get so complex with all this, whether it's classical music or even if it's with rock or hip hop or jazz or whatever. It gets too complicated. People can't understand it. And you can make something beautiful and meaningful, but simple. For a long time, I didn't believe that they melded, and kind of like God and science. I don't think for a lot of people don't feel that God and science meld, but I kind of do. But art and science especially, I felt that with logic, I must have studied logic for about 4 or 5 years, and I had studied with a number of different composers. I could not make heads or tails out of it. Finally, I just sat down with a book and I said, I'm going to learn this darn thing. And within a week, I had figured it out. But I found that now I can't keep myself away from logic. I just want to sit and compose with logic 24/7, and at times to the disparaging part of my life where I'm not paying my bills and so forth and so on. Well, I always start with those five composers: Michel Legrand, Peter Nero, Andre Previn, Henry Mamey, and John Williams, and that was always my first love. And I didn't want to know of anything else. And then I had to take a music appreciation class in college, and we had to listen to classical music, and I knew, that was the last thing I wanted to do. Classical music was old, dusty music. Who wants to listen to that junk? And I remember there was a girl that was in school with me in this music appreciation class, and so I took her, asked her if she'd like to go to the Hollywood Bowl. And she said, yeah, and I had never been to the Hollywood Bowl, so we went. And it was absolutely stunning at the Hollywood Bowl because there was 18,000 people there, and not a sound was made by the audience. They were just enraptured and listening to Rachmaninoff. And I'm sitting with a beautiful woman. I'm listening to Rachmaninoff. I'm under the stars. It's a beautiful summer night. And that's what started me into classical music. And this stuff ain't bad. Either you have a live orchestra there. I'm not listening to a couple of speakers. It was enthralling. It was, and from that point on, I was kind of hooked. It wasn't old dusty Beethoven or Mozart, but it was like brand new sounds to my ears, and each conductor brought something new to the orchestra and a different interpretation of it. And I thought, wow, this is amazing that you can, with the very same music, get a completely different feeling after you leave the theater. There have been times that I have been very happy with the results of my labors. I did an evening with Sid Caesar, and it was half Sid Caesar and half classical music. And the first part was Debussy's Prelude to the Afternoon of a Faun, and Copland's Rodeo, and Shostakovich's Festival Overture. And then the second half we did with Sid Caesar, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, and a number of other sundries. And that was, I loved doing that because people were brought into the fold through to classical music where they wouldn't have been brought in otherwise through the medium of major television personalities such as Sid Caesar. There was another thing that I did called An Evening with George Gershwin, and where I explained how George Gershwin wrote the Rhapsody in Blue and The American in Paris. And at that we had tons of little children, as well as many, about 600 adults in the audience, and the kids were just absolutely fascinated. I felt that was the way to bring them from rock and roll into classical music was through George Gershwin. And that night we did. And I explained how all the music was put together, how Gershwin conceived it, and then I sat down at the piano and played the Rhapsody in Blue and conducted from the piano. When you bring people into the theater and they see the magic that is happening, because they are not listening again to a couple of speakers, but they're listening to a live orchestra. There are entertainers on stage, and they are absolutely enthralled. I don't try to stay on any one composer for too long, and the reason for that is they are so inundated with television and film and change of scenes. If you watch a television commercial today, I mean, there's in a 30-second commercial, there's about at least 20 scene changes. So they're constantly being bombarded with from every which way on television and film with scene changes. So they get bored extremely easily. So how do you keep them there? Well, with a long piece of music such as Beethoven or Mozart. So there's always a way to do this, and that's the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing today.